Hey everyone, Snaphat here. Just a quick video about longsword sets in version 2.0 of Monster Hunter Rise. So by now, it's probably pretty well established that the Tigrine need is the best, and yeah, this is basically that build. So in case you didn't know, if you start from the Iron Katana level, just before you upgrade it into the Tigrine Edge, you can actually get the ramp up skill of Silkbind boost, which basically increases the damage of your Silkbind moves, like your Soaring Kick and your Spirit Helmbreaker, by 10%. So if you're really good at this game, Silkbind boost, Tigrine need, amazing weapon. And this is that build for it. If your charm isn't quite good, the first thing you want to drop is crit boost, but yeah. However, I do want to make a point that Silkbind boost isn't the be-all and end-all of all of your sets. If you do your math, which I'll get to later, it's in a spreadsheet below, if you land about 25 or more hits between each of your Spirit Helmbreakers, it's actually a bit better to have the Affinity augment instead of the Silkbind boost ramp up. So keep that in mind. If you're playing, it's probably a good idea to just, in the back of your head, count your hits. If you get a really high number, that's okay. Keep practicing, keep getting better, but for now it's probably worth just using Affinity augment. I also want to note that this isn't the only raw build. There are some other pretty good raw builds as well. So here I have 4 raw builds that have slightly varying amounts of damage and slightly varying amounts of sharpness. They're all pretty equal overall, so just pick whichever one you want. Personally, since I run Sleep Buddies and I like big numbers, I just run the full damage Tigrine set. But if you want higher sharpness, nothing wrong with using the Chameleon Spin Sword, Monster's Touch, Protective Polish, whichever you want. Now, Element. This is where things get interesting, and probably why I clicked this video. So it turns out that Element Longsword is actually legit in Rise, and especially here in 2.0. First of all, fire. So the Rathalos Longsword, the Wyvern Blade Maple, is actually really strong. You should use it on basically any fire weak monsters. And this is more or less the build you want to run. You might notice that this is basically the exact same build as the Tigrine need. What you can do instead, if you want, you can change the Lagombi arms for the Teostra arms in this set, which gets you the Teostra Blessing and about 5% more fire element and a bit more defense, but you lose 1 point of speed sharpening. Use whichever one you want. Now for your ramp up, it does sort of depend. So you have 2 main options. Elemental Exploit is really good because it increases your elemental damage by 30% against monsters with an elemental hit zone of above 25. So this is really good on monsters like, going through my list, Chameleos, Almudron, Gosharag, Lagombi, Royal Lugeroth, and Great Baggy. Your other option is the Attack Up ramp, which is really good against Apex Arzuros, which doesn't quite hit that 25 elemental hit zone, and also Kezu, whose raw hit zone values are so high that you want that extra raw instead of the extra element. If you just want to make one, I'd recommend you use the Elemental Exploit, but you may as well make 2. It's really good. Before we get to the other elemental weapons, we need a quick bit of theory. Basically, elemental weapons are good if you're using fast, weak attacks, which are most of the Longsword's moves, and are less good if you're using slow, strong attacks, like the EI Spirit Slash, and especially the Spirit Helmbreaker. So the better you are at Longsword, and the better you are at landing Spirit Helmbreakers and EI Spirit Slashes, the worse Elemental is. In other words, the following builds are really only good in very niche situations, and even then, only if you aren't good at landing Spirit Helmbreakers. Basically, don't think of this as a replacement for the high damage Silkbind boost Tigrine need, but think of these builds as a replacement for your Affinity ramp Tigrine need, or your higher sharpness builds. So now let's go through the elements. So for ice, you have the Rimeblossom Longsword. Now there's a bit of misinformation being spread around about how the Rimeblossom Longsword is really good because it has Silkbind boost. While that was true in version 1.0, unfortunately in version 2.0, Silkbind boost really isn't that good. See, remember what I said about how Spirit Helmbreakers are really good for raw damage. This means that the Rimeblossom's Spirit Helmbreakers really aren't that good at all compared to Tigrine's Spirit Helm Breakers, even if you take into account Silkbind Boost. And if you are using Spirit Helm Breaker, then there's no point to using Silkbind Boost. I've done the math below, and basically against ice weak enemies like Rajang or Diablos, if you're good at Helm Breakers and you want to land Helm Breakers, don't use Rimeblossom. Use Tigrine. On the other hand, if you are good at Spirit Helm Breakers, or you want to use Sakura Slash for some reason, there's no point to using Silkbind Boost. Use the Ice Up ramp instead. But there is one exception. There is one monster whose ice weakness is so high that it's actually worth using Silkbind Boost on the Rimeblossom. And that monster is the Great Roggy. So if you really want to speedrun Great Roggy, or you really want to use Silkbind Boost the Rimeblossom, then this is the fight for you. For anything else, either don't bother or use Ice Up ramp. Now for the Water Longsword, the best longsword is the Almudron Longsword, the Doombringer Blade, which has this build. So this weapon's elemental is actually really good, and it has an elemental exploit ramp up, which boosts it even higher. Unfortunately, its raw is really bad, which limits its use cases. Turns out it's really good for beating up Volvidon, but nothing else right now. So if you want to beat up Volvidon, use this longsword. And that's honestly basically it. For Thunder, you can use the Zinogre Longsword, the Despot Boltbreaker, which in my opinion is one of the coolest looking longswords. Unfortunately, no enemies are actually that weak to Thunder. The ones that are, like Tigrex and Narga, are also really weak to Raw, so you're far better off just using a Raw weapon in basically every situation. After looking things up really closely, I did find one very niche use for the Despot Boltbreaker, just because it has the anti-aquatic boost ramp up. So it turns out there's one enemy that is both aquatic and thunder weak, and that monster is the Pteranodon. But honestly, even then, it's not actually that good. This is one of the situations where if you can land your Helm Breakers, it's not worth doing it. But if you really want to, you can. Beat up a Pteranodon. And as for Dragon Longswords, well, unlike World, we don't actually have any good Dragon Longswords in this game yet. You've got the Squawk Scythe, which is bad. Maybe the Ibushi Longsword will get an upgrade later on. Rampage exists, but like against any Dragon weak enemy, you're better off using Tigrine. So yeah, in summary, if you're really good at the game, or you like big numbers, use the Tigrine with a Silkbind Boost ramp up. Unless you're fighting Chameleos, Almudron, Kosterag, Logombi, Royal Ludroth, or Great Baggy, when you want to use the Wyvern Blade Maple with an Elemental Exploit ramp up. Against Kezu and Osros, you want to use the same longsword, but with an Affinity Augment. Against Great Jaggy, you can use Rimeblossom with Silkbind Boost, and against Volvidon, you can use a Doombringer Blade with Elemental Exploit. If you're less good at landing Helm Breakers, you want to do some flex picks, or you want comfort sharpness, you can use the comfier raw builds. Against Rajang and Tigrex, you can use the Ice Up Rimeblossom. And against Pteranodon, you can use the Thunder Despot Boltbreaker weapon, because it has anti-aquatic species. Oh, and the Rathalos Longsword becomes decent against Tobi Kadachi and Barriath. Anyways, thanks for watching, and happy hunting. And one day I'll upload that VGVG episode.